Pay before you eat, Mr. Harrison sneers, his voice slicing through the Oak Room's hum, his eyes raking over Serena Vance's t-shirt and jeans. Did you hear me? Pay up or get out. He signals the guard, a hulking figure stepping closer as Serena's pulse spikes. Her father's dream, a restaurant where every guest is a VIP, shatters under his disdain. Do they have to pay first? She asks, her voice steady, gesturing to the white diners savoring their meals. Or is it just because I'm black? The room freezes, tension crackling. Serena, the secret heiress, ignites a battle to reclaim her father's legacy. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe and like for the next story. Serena Vance stood before the glass doors of the Oak Room, her pulse quickening like a drumbeat in her chest. Her fingers grazed the cool metal handle, hesitating, as if to savor the weight of this moment. This was her father's dream, his cathedral of taste and dignity, where every guest was royalty, where plates of seared scallops and velvety Bordeaux were served with smiles that made you feel seen. She could almost hear his voice, warm and resolute. Every customer is a VIP, Serena. That's the heart of this place. In her plain white t-shirt and jeans, she was no heiress tonight. Just a woman stepping into a memory, eager to see if the dream still breathed. She pushed the door open. The air inside was rich with the scent of roasted herbs and polished wood, a faint hum of jazz weaving through the clink of glasses. Her eyes traced the chandelier's golden glow, its light fracturing across the room like a promise. Serena's lips curved faintly, her heart swelling with pride. This was it, the place her father had poured his soul into, where every bite was a masterpiece, every server a storyteller of warmth. She wanted to lose herself in it, to feel the magic she'd imagined since childhood. She chose a corner table, small and unassuming, her sneakers silent against the polished floor. As she settled into the plush chair, her gaze swept the room. Couples in tailored suits and shimmering dresses laughed over candlelit plates, their voices a soft murmur. A man in a pinstripe suit raised a glass, his cufflinks glinting. Serena's chest tightened with anticipation. She was ready to be welcomed, to be treated as her father's vision demanded. But then she saw him. Mr. Harrison, the manager, moved through the dining room like a hawk, his sharp eyes scanning for prey. His smile was a practice blade, flashing for a woman in a silk gown, lingering as he bowed to a man with a Rolex. Yet when a young couple in casual sweaters approached, his lips tightened, his nod curt, dismissive. Serena's fingers curled around the edge of her menu, a flicker of unease stirring in her gut. Was this the warmth her father spoke of? A young waitress, Maya, caught her eye. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, her smile genuine as she leaned toward an elderly couple, jotting down their order with care. "Would you like the vinaigrette on the side?" she asked, her voice soft but bright, like she meant it. Serena's shoulders relaxed slightly. Maya was different. Her kindness felt like a thread of her father's dream still woven into this place. But Harrison's shadow loomed closer. He paused at a table of executives, his laughter loud, performative, his hand grazing a chair as if staking claim. Serena watched, her breath shallow as he glanced her way. His eyes narrowed, lingering on her t-shirt, her jeans, her unadorned hands. A faint smirk curled his lip, and her stomach twisted. She pushed it down, clinging to her father's words. Every customer is a VIP. Surely this place would prove him right. She raised a hand to signal Maya. The waitress hurried over, her smile unwavering. "Good evening. What can I get started for you?" Her pen hovered over her notepad, eager, attentive. Serena opened her mouth to order a fresh garden salad, perhaps, or the steak her father used to rave about. But before she could speak, a shadow fell across the table. "Stop." Harrison's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold, loud enough to turn heads. Maya froze, her pen trembling. Serena's pulse spiked, but she kept her eyes steady, meeting his. He stood over her, arms crossed, his tailored suit a stark contrast to her casual attire. His gaze raked over her, from her sneakers to her simple braid, and his smirk deepened into something crueler. "Miss," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "we don't have time for this." He leaned closer, his tone lowering, but still loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "We don't want trouble with your kind of customer. Pay up front or leave." Serena's breath caught, her chest tightening as if the air had been sucked from the room. Her father's dream, plates of art, smiles that welcomed all, shattered like glass in her mind. Her fingers clenched the menu, the paper crinkling under her grip. She wanted to scream, to demand he see her, but instead her lips twitched into a faint, bitter smile. "Your kind." The words burned, a cold splash of reality dousing her hope. Maya's face paled, her eyes darting between Serena and Harrison, a silent apology flickering in them. Around them a few diners snickered, their forks pausing mid-bite. Others averted their eyes, their silence louder than words. Serena's heart pounded not with fear, but with a quiet, smoldering resolve. She straightened her spine, her gaze locking onto Harrison's. Let him think he'd won this moment. Let him think she was nothing. Her fingers brushed the edge of her purse where her phone waited. She didn't move for it, not yet. But the weight of it, the power it held, thrummed in her veins like a second heartbeat. The dream was broken, but she was not. And she would make sure this place remembered who she was. Serena's fingers tightened around the menu, the crinkle of paper a faint echo in the sudden hush of the oak room. Harrison's words, "your kind of customer," hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Her chest burned, not with the sting of humiliation, but with a sharper, deeper ache, betrayal. The dream her father had painted, of a place where every soul was cherished, lay in shards at her feet. Yet her face remained a mask of calm, her eyes locked on Harrison's smirk, that cruel curl of his lips daring her to react. She wouldn't, not yet, but the fire in her veins was rising. Maya stood frozen, her notepad trembling in her hands. Her lips parted, a whisper of "I'm so sorry," slipping out, barely audible. Serena caught her gaze, offering a slight nod, a silent reassurance. The girl's eyes were wide with shame, her shoulders hunched as if she could shrink away from Harrison's venom. Around them, the dining room held its breath. A man in a navy suit chuckled softly, his fork tapping his plate. A woman in pearls glanced away, her fingers fidgeting with her napkin. Their silence was complicity, and it cut deeper than Harrison's words. "Pay up front," Harrison repeated louder now, his voice slicing through the jazz humming from the speakers. He leaned forward, his shadow falling across Serena's table, his cologne sharp and invasive. "Or leave. Now." His eyes flicked to her t-shirt, her jeans, her unpolished nails, as if they were evidence of some crime. "We don't need trouble here." Serena's pulse thundered in her ears, but her voice when it came was steady, cold as steel. "Trouble?" she said, tilting her head slightly. "What kind exactly, Mr. Harrison?" Her words were a blade, precise, testing the edge of his arrogance. For a moment his smirk faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. But he recovered quickly, his chin jerking toward the security guard lingering near the bar, a hulking figure in a black suit, already stepping closer. "You know what I mean," Harrison snapped, his tone hardening. "People like you think they can walk in here, act like they belong. This isn't that kind of place." He straightened, folding his arms, his stance a challenge. The guard loomed nearer, his hand resting on his radio, ready to act on Harrison's signal. Serena's lips twitched, not into a smile, but something sharper, a glint of defiance. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Every customer is a VIP. She'd come here expecting warmth, expecting plates of art and servers who made you feel like family. Instead, she'd found this, a man who saw her skin, her clothes, and decided she was less. Her stomach twisted, not with fear, but with a quiet, simmering fury. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, the diner's stares prickling her skin like needles. Some smirked, others turned away, but none spoke. Their silence was a verdict, and it stung. Maya's hand shook, her notepad slipping slightly. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, "maybe we could—" "Enough, Maya." Harrison cut her off, his glare pinning her like a butterfly to a board. "Get back to work. Real customers are waiting." Maya flinched, her cheeks flushing, but she didn't move, her eyes darting to Serena with a plea for forgiveness. Serena held her gaze for a moment, her own eyes softening just enough to say, "This isn't your fault." The room seemed to contract, the air thick with tension. A young couple at a nearby table whispered, their phones already out, capturing the scene. The man in the navy suit leaned back, his chuckle fading as he sensed the shift in the room's pulse. Serena's fingers brushed the edge of her purse, where her phone lay like a loaded gun. She didn't reach for it, not yet, but the weight of it, the power it held, pulsed in her fingertips. She could end this now, could shatter Harrison's smug world with a single call. But something held her back. Let him dig his grave deeper. Let him think he'd won. Her gaze flicked to the guard, now only steps away, his broad shoulders blocking the light. Then back to Harrison, whose smirk had returned, emboldened by her silence. "Last chance," he said, his voice dripping with mock patience. "Pay, or you're out." He gestured to the guard, a flick of his wrist like he was shooing a stray dog. Serena's heart pounded, but her face remained a fortress. Inside, a storm raged. Grief for her father's broken dream, rage at the man before her, and a cold, sharp resolve to reclaim what was hers. She leaned back slightly, her fingers still resting on her purse, her eyes never leaving Harrison's. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper, but heavy with intent. Harrison laughed, a short barking sound. "Oh, I'm sure." He turned away, already dismissing her, his heels clicking on the floor as he strode toward the bar. The room exhaled, whispers erupting like sparks. Maya's hands trembled as she backed away, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Serena sat still, her breath slow and deliberate, her mind racing. The dream was dead, but she wasn't, and neither was her father's legacy. Her fingers grazed her phone again, the cool metal grounding her. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The guard took another step closer, his shadow swallowing her table. Serena's lips curved, not into a smile, but something darker, something that promised reckoning. She was ready. The air in the oak room thickened, heavy with unspoken accusations. Serena sat motionless, her fingers still grazing the edge of her purse, the cool leather grounding her like an anchor in a swelling sea. Harrison's words, "people like you," echoed in her skull, each syllable a fresh wound. Her father's dream, the one she'd carried like a torch, flickered in her chest, threatening to gut her out. But her face betrayed nothing. Her eyes, dark and unyielding, followed Harrison as he strutted back to the bar, his laughter a jagged blade in the quiet. She let the silence stretch, let it press against the room's edges, a coiled spring ready to snap. Maya hovered nearby, her notepad clutched like a lifeline. Her lips quivered, a silent plea trapped behind them, her eyes darting between Serena and the floor. I didn't mean, she whispered, barely audible, her voice cracking under the weight of Harrison's cruelty. Serena's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, a wordless, "It's not you." But the fire in her gut burned hotter, fueled by the betrayal of this place, this shrine to her father's ideals, now tainted by a man who saw her as less than human. The diner's stares prickled her skin. A woman in a sequined dress whispered to her companion, her eyes flicking toward Serena with a mix of pity and curiosity. The man in the navy suit from earlier leaned forward, his phone half raised, the faint glow of its screen catching the chandelier's light. Others turned away, their forks scraping plates in a feeble attempt to ignore the scene. Their silence was a chorus, singing of complicity, and it stung deeper than Harrison's sneer. Serena's chest tightened, her breath shallow but deliberate, as if each inhale were a choice to stay rooted, to not let this moment break her. Harrison stood at the bar, his back to her, his shoulders squared with smug triumph. He murmured something to a bartender who laughed nervously, glancing at Serena. The security guard loomed closer, his heavy footsteps a dull thud against the polished floor. His hand rested on his radio, his eyes fixed on Serena, waiting for Harrison's final nod. She could feel his presence, a wall of intimidation meant to cow her, but her pulse didn't falter. Instead, it steadied, a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Her fingers brushed her phone tucked inside her purse. It was a lifeline, a weapon she hadn't yet drawn. She could end this now, could shatter Harrison's world with a single call. But she waited, her gaze locked on his silhouette. Let him savor his victory a moment longer. Let him think he'd won. Her lips twitched, not into a smile, but a shadow of one, sharp and dangerous. Inside, her mind churned, replaying her father's voice. Every customer is a VIP. This place was supposed to be a sanctuary, a haven where dignity was served alongside every plate. Instead, it was a stage for prejudice, and she was its unwilling star. The guard took another step, his shadow swallowing the edge of her table. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but firm, "you need to come with me." His tone carried a trace of reluctance, his eyes avoiding hers. Serena's fingers stilled on her purse, her breath catching for a fraction of a second. Not fear, never fear, but a spark of something raw, something that felt like grief and fury braided together. She thought of her father, his calloused hands sketching menus late at night, his dreams of a place where no one was turned away. This guard, this room, this moment, they were all betrayals of that vision. She lifted her chin, her eyes meeting the guard's. "Is that so?" she said, her voice soft but edged, like a blade wrapped in velvet. The guard blinked, his hand hesitating on his radio. The room seemed to lean in, the whispers growing sharper. the air electric with anticipation. The woman in sequins paused, her wine glass halfway to her lips. The man with the phone angled it higher, the red dot of his camera blinking like an unblinking eye. Harrison turned, catching the exchange. His smirk faltered, a flicker of unease creasing his brow. He strode back toward Serena's table, his heels clicking with purpose. "What's the holdup?" He snapped at the guard, his voice loud enough to draw every eye. "I said get her out." His hand sliced through the air, a gesture of finality, as if Serena were a stain to be wiped clean. Serena's heart thudded, not with panic but with clarity. Her father's dream was a ghost in this room, but she could summon it back. She could make them all see. Her fingers closed around her phone, the cool metal a promise against her skin. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her eyes burned into Harrison's, unyielding, unrelenting. He shifted, his confidence cracking just enough for her to notice the slight tremor in his hand. Maya took a step back, her breath hitching, her eyes wide with fear and hope. The guard hesitated, his gaze flicking between Serena and Harrison, caught in the crossfire of something he couldn't name. The room held its breath, the tension a living thing, coiling tighter with every second. Serena's lips parted, a single word forming in her mind. Now, her thumb hovered over her phone screen, the call one tap away. The storm was coming and she was its heart. Serena's thumb pressed the screen, a single tap that sliced through the taut silence of the oak room. The phone speaker crackled to life, a faint hum that seemed to pull every gaze tighter to her table. Her eyes never left Harrison's, her stare a steel trap pinning him where he stood. His smirk lingered, but it was brittle now, a mask cracking at the edges. The guard hovered, his hand still on his radio, his breath uneven, caught in the gravity of her stillness. Maya's fingers clutched her notepad, her knuckles white, her eyes darting between Serena and the floor as if bracing for a storm. "David," Serena said, her voice low, deliberate, each syllable a pebble dropped into a still pond. The speaker amplified her words, sending ripples through the room. "It's me, Serena Vance. I'm at the flagship. I need to speak with your manager, Mr. Harrison, through your line." A pause, then a man's voice burst from the phone, sharp with panic. "Serena? Oh, God, Mr. Harrison? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? That's Serena Vance, the new owner of the entire Oak Room chain." David's words were a thunderclap, shattering the air. Gasps rippled through the diners, forks clattering against plates. The woman in sequins froze, her wine glass trembling. The man with the phone leaned closer, his camera's red dot blinking furiously, capturing every second. Harrison's face drained of color, his smirk collapsing into a slack-jawed gape. His hands twitched, reaching for nothing, as if the ground beneath him had vanished. "Miss Vance?" he stammered, his voice a thin, desperate thread. No, this is a mistake. I was just following protocol." His eyes darted to the guard, to Maya, to the diners, seeking an ally, a lifeline. None came. His chest heaved, a shallow pant, as sweat beaded on his brow. Serena tilted her head, her expression unreadable, a predator studying prey. "Protocol?" she said, her voice soft but laced with venom. "Was it protocol to insult me, Mr. Harrison? Or to decide I don't belong because of my skin and my clothes?" Her words were a scalpel, precise, cutting through his bluster. Inside, her heart roared, a tempest of grief for her father's tarnished dream, fury at this man's arrogance, and a fierce, unyielding resolve to reclaim what was hers. Her fingers tightened around the phone, the cool metal an anchor against the storm within. Harrison stumbled forward, his hands raised in a feeble defense. I didn't know. I swear I thought. His voice cracked, his eyes wild, pleading with the room. The guard stepped back, his shoulders sagging, his gaze dropping to the floor as if ashamed to be part of this. Maya's breath hitched, a tear slipping down her cheek, but her lips curved into a faint, trembling smile, as if hope were dawning. The diners were no longer silent. Whispers swelled into a low buzz, phones raised higher, their screens glowing like fireflies. The man in the navy suit leaned back, his chuckle long gone, his eyes wide with something like awe. The woman in pearls clutched her napkin, her face flushed with second-hand shame. Serena felt their stares, their judgment shifting, no longer aimed at her, but at the man unraveling before them. Her chest tightened, not with pain but with power, a current surging through her veins. She was no longer the outsider. She was the heir, the reckoning. Harrison's voice rose, a desperate plea. Please, Miss Vance, I didn't mean, let me explain. He took another step, his hands outstretched as if he could claw back his words, his actions. But Serena's gaze held him fast, unyielding, a mirror reflecting his own ugliness back at him. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Every customer is a VIP. She'd come here expecting warmth, expecting dignity. Instead, she'd found a man who'd spit on that legacy, who'd seen her skin and deemed her worthless. Her jaw clenched, a muscle twitching, but her voice remained steady, a blade honed to perfection. Explain? She said, rising from her chair, her movements slow, deliberate, like a queen claiming her throne. The room seemed to shrink around her, every eye locked on her form. Explain why you humiliated me in front of this entire room? Why do you assume I was in trouble because of how I look? Her words were quiet, but they carried, slicing through the murmurs, the clinking glasses, the faint jazz. Harrison flinched, his hands dropping, his face a mask of panic. Maya stepped closer, her notepad forgotten, her eyes shining with something fierce, something proud. The guard shifted uncomfortably, his radio silent. His role in this drama dissolved. A young woman at a nearby table began clapping, a slow, deliberate rhythm that spread, tentative at first, then bolder, as others joined in. The sound was a pulse, a heartbeat, drowning out Harrison's faltering excuses. Serena's fingers loosened on her phone, setting it down with a soft click. She didn't need it anymore. The truth was out, a fire ignited, and she was its keeper. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with certainty. This was her father's house, and she would burn away its rot. Harrison stood frozen, a man undone, his world crumbling under her gaze. The room waited, breathless, for her next move. The applause in the oak room faltered, then died, leaving a silence so heavy it seemed to press against Serena's skin. She stood, her shadow stretching across the table, her eyes locked on Harrison's trembling form. His face was a ruin, pale, sweat slicked, his lips twitching with unspoken pleas. The room's gaze bore into him, a jury of diners and staff, their phones still raised, capturing his unraveling. Serena's heart thundered, a war drum fueled by the ashes of her father's dream and the fire of her own resolve. She let the silence linger, let it choke him, her stillness a weapon sharper than any shout. Harrison's hands clenched and unclenched, his breath ragged. "Miss Vance," he whispered, his voice a broken thing. "I didn't know. I swear, His words stumbled, tripping over the weight of his own guilt. Serena's lips tightened, a flicker of disgust curling in her chest. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done, only for who she was. Her father's voice, warm and steady, echoed in her mind. Every customer is a VIP. This man had defiled that, had turned her father's sanctuary into a stage for his prejudice. Her fingers twitched, itching to crush his arrogance, but she held back, her gaze a blade honed on his fear. She stepped forward, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. The room leaned in, the air electric, every breath held captive. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice low, deliberate, each word a stone dropped into the stillness. "I have one question for you." She paused, her eyes sweeping the dining room, lingering on the man in the navy suit, now rigid with unease, and the woman in pearls, her napkin twisted into knots. "Your pay up front policy," she turned back to Harrison, her stare unyielding. "Does it apply to them?" Her hand gestured toward a table of white diners, their plates piled with untouched lobster and glistening wine glasses. "Or was it crafted just for me, because I'm a black woman in a t-shirt and jeans?" The question hung, a guillotine blade poised to fall. Harrison's mouth opened, then closed, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. The room's silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the jazz, now a mocking undertone. A young couple at a nearby table shifted, their faces flushed with shame. The man with the phone lowered it slightly, his bravado gone, replaced by a flicker of respect. Maya stood frozen, her notepad clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with awe, a tear tracing her cheek. Serena's chest tightened, not with pain, but with power. She could feel her father's presence in this moment, his dream clawing its way back to life through her. Harrison's hands shook, his voice a rasp. "It's not, I didn't mean," but his words were dust, scattering in the face of her truth. She stepped closer, her presence a tide, unstoppable. "You didn't mean to?" she said, her tone soft but searing. "You meant every word. You saw me and decided I was less. You betrayed everything this place stands for." The diner's whispers swelled, a tide of murmurs washing over the room. A woman in a sequined dress pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes glistening. The guard, still lingering, dropped his gaze, his radio forgotten. Serena's heart pounded, a rhythm of grief and fury, but her face remained a fortress. She thought of her father's hands, worn from years of building this place, his laughter as he described a world where every guest was royalty. Harrison had spit on that legacy, and now he would pay. "Put your keys and badge on the table," Serena said, her voice a command, unwavering. "Now." Harrison's hands fumbled, his fingers clumsy as he unclipped his badge, the metal clinking against the table like a surrender. His keys followed, a dull thud. His eyes begged for mercy, but Serena offered none. "You're done here," she said, "not because you insulted me, but because you betrayed the heart of the Oak Room, the principle that every customer is a VIP." She turned to Maya, her voice softening, a warmth breaking through the steel. "Maya, your kindness hasn't gone unnoticed. You'll oversee operations for now." Maya's breath caught, her eyes shining with disbelief and gratitude, her shoulders straightening as if a weight had lifted. The room erupted in applause, tentative at first, then bold, a wave of sound crashing over the silence. The woman in pearls joined in, her hands trembling. The man in the navy suit clapped slowly, his face a mask of reckoning. Phones were raised again, capturing Serena's triumph. the red dots of cameras like stars in a new constellation. Harrison stood, a ghost in his own ruin, his shoulders sagging as he turned and shuffled toward the exit, the click of his heels a fading echo. Serena sank back into her chair, her pulse still racing, her fingers brushing the table where her father's dream had been reborn. The applause faded, but the air hummed with change, with possibility. She wasn't done, not yet. This was only the beginning. The echo of Harrison's retreating footsteps had barely faded when Serena rose again, her silhouette commanding the center of the oak room. The applause lingered, a ragged pulse of awe and shame, as diners and staff watched her with bated breath. Her chest was a furnace, the heat of her father's broken dream now ablaze she wielded like a torch. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the faces, some flushed with guilt, others alight with admiration. Maya stood near the bar, her notepad clutched tight, her tear-streaked face glowing with quiet pride. The air crackled, not with tension now, but with possibility, as if the room itself sensed a new dawn breaking. Serena's fingers brushed the edge of her chair, grounding her. The weight of her father's legacy pressed against her ribs, not a burden, but a call to arms. She could still feel the sting of Harrison's words, "Your kind," like a bruise on her soul, but it only sharpened her resolve. Her heart pounded, a rhythm of grief and triumph, her breath steady as she stepped into the light. The chandelier above cast fractured beams across her, bathing her in a glow that felt like her father's blessing. She straightened, her voice ready to carve a new path through the wreckage of this night. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her words clear, resonant, slicing through the murmurs like a blade through silk. "Tonight, we've witnessed a betrayal." Her gaze flicked to the empty space where Harrison had stood, his absence a wound now cauterized. "Not just of me, but of the dream that built the oak room." Her voice was low, steady, but each syllable carried the weight of her father's vision. A place where every guest was royalty, where plates of seared duck and crisp salads were served with warmth that made you feel whole. My father believed in dignity. He believed every customer was a VIP, no matter their clothes, their skin, their story. Her eyes locked on a man in a pinstripe suit, his cufflinks glinting as he shifted uncomfortably. She let her gaze linger, letting him feel the weight of his earlier silence. "That dream was tarnished tonight," she continued, her voice rising, a tide of conviction. "But it's not dead, not while I'm here." Her words were a vow, etched in the air, and the room leaned closer, phones raised, their screens flickering like stars capturing her truth. Maya's lips trembled, her eyes shining with something fierce, something unbroken. Serena's breath hitched, a flicker of her father's laughter in her mind, his stories of late-night menu sketches, his promise that no one would ever leave the oak room feeling less. Her jaw tightened, a muscle twitching as she pushed down the ache of that memory. "The Vance standard," she said, her voice a clarion call, "is respect. It's dignity. It's the belief that every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated like they belong." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, catching the woman in pearls, her hands knotted in her lap, and the young couple, their eyes wide with quiet awe. "From this moment, that standard is non-negotiable. Anyone, staff or guest, who can't meet it has no place here." The words landed like stones in a still pond, ripples spreading through the room. Her chest burned, not with anger now, but with purpose. She could feel her father's presence, his calloused hands steadying her, his dream alive in her veins. Her fingers curled into fists, not from rage, but from resolve, her nails biting into her palms. She thought of Maya's kindness, the way she'd smiled at every guest and let that fuel her. "This is more than a restaurant," she said, her voice softening but unyielding. "It's a promise to honor every soul who crosses our threshold, and I will not let that promise be broken again." The room erupted. Applause crashed like waves, tentative at first, then thunderous, led by a young woman in a sequined dress who stood, her hands clapping fiercely. Others followed, the man in the navy suit joining in, his face flushed with something like redemption. The woman in pearls clapped softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Maya stepped forward, her notepad forgotten, her smile radiant, as if Serena's words had lifted a weight from her shoulders. Phones flashed, their cameras capturing the moment. The hashtag, your Vance standard, already sparking to life online, a fire spreading beyond these walls. Serena stood tall, her heart a drumbeat of grief and hope. She saw her father's face in her mind, his eyes crinkling with pride and her throat tightened. She'd come here expecting a sanctuary, a place where dignity was served alongside every meal. Instead, she'd found a battleground. But she was no victim. She was the heir, the keeper of the flame. The applause swelled, a chorus of support, and she let it wash over her, a tide of renewal. As the clapping faded, she nodded to Maya, a silent charge to carry forward. "Let's rebuild this dream," she said, her voice a quiet command, resonating with every soul in the room. The air hummed with change, with the promise of a new day. Serena's lips curved, a faint, fierce smile. The fight wasn't over, but it had begun. The oak room buzzed with a new energy, the echoes of Serena's words still reverberating in the clink of glasses and the low hum of voices. She stood at the center, her silhouette framed by the chandelier's glow, her heart a furnace of resolve and grief, her father's dream. Every customer a VIP, every plate a testament to dignity, had been reignited, but the scars of Harrison's betrayal lingered, a bitter aftertaste on her tongue. Her fingers twitched, still tingling with the weight of her speech, as if the words themselves had carved new lines into her palms. The room watched her, not with judgment now, but with something akin to reverence. Their phones lowered but still glowing, spreading her truth beyond these walls. Serena's breath steadied, her eyes catching Maya's, bright with pride, a flicker of courage kindled by her charge to lead. The young waitress stood taller, her notepad tucked away, her hands no longer trembling. Serena nodded a silent acknowledgement, but her mind was already racing forward, past this room, past this night. Harrison was gone, but the rot he'd sown ran deeper. She could feel it in the averted gazes of some diners, in the nervous shuffle of a waiter near the bar. Her father's legacy demanded more than a single reckoning. It demanded a revolution. She stepped back to her table, her sneakers silent on the polished floor, but her presence was a current, pulling the room with her. "Maya," she said, her voice low but firm, "get me a laptop from the office. Now." Maya nodded, her steps quick, purposeful, as she disappeared behind the bar. The diners resumed their meals, but their whispers were electric, laced with anticipation. The woman in sequins leaned toward her companion, her voice a hushed thrill. "Did you see her? She's changing everything." The man in the navy suit typed furiously on his phone, his earlier smugness replaced by a fervent intensity, as if he were witnessing history. Serena's chest tightened, a knot of grief and purpose. Her father's face flashed in her mind, his calloused hands sketching menus, his laughter promising a world where no one was turned away. She'd come here expecting that world, only to find a battlefield. But she was no bystander. Her fingers brushed her phone, the screen still warm from the call that had undone Harrison. She opened an email, her hand steady, her mind sharp. The subject line burned in her thoughts. The Vance Standard. She began typing, each word a vow to her father, to herself, to every soul who'd ever been made to feel less. Ladies and gentlemen of the Oak Room, she wrote, her fingers flying, tonight we reclaim our purpose. The email was addressed to every employee across the chain, from dishwashers to regional managers. Respect is not negotiable. Dignity is not optional. Every customer is a VIP, and we will honor that with every action, every day. She outlined a mandatory training program, workshops on dismantling bias, on serving with empathy, on seeing every guest as her father had. She announced a fund to reward kindness, inspired by Maya's quiet grace, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with clarity, each sentence a brick in the foundation of a new legacy. Maya returned, laptop in hand, her eyes bright with purpose. "It's ready, Miss Vance," she said, her voice steady now, a partner in this fight. Serena nodded, uploading the email and hitting send. The soft chime of confirmation felt like a gunshot, a signal that the battle was no longer confined to this room. Her throat tightened, a flicker of her father's pride in her veins. She could almost hear his voice. "You're doing it, Serena." The room shifted, diners glancing at their phones as notifications pinged. A young woman at a corner table gasped, showing her screen to her friend. "It's gone viral. Vance Standard is trending." The man in the navy suit stood, his voice carrying. "I'm a food critic, Miss Vance. I'm writing about this. You're changing the game." His words were earnest, a confession of his earlier silence. Serena met his gaze, her lips curving faintly, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. Change was coming, and they all felt it. A waiter approached, hesitant, his hands twisting. "Miss Vance, I've seen things like this before. I never spoke up. I'm sorry." His voice cracked, his eyes downcast. Serena's chest ached, not with anger, but with hope. "Start now," she said softly, her words a lifeline. He nodded, his shoulders straightening as if her forgiveness had unshackled him. The woman in pearls approached, her hands trembling. "I didn't say anything earlier," she whispered. "I should have. I'll make it right." She pulled out her phone, typing a review, her fingers shaking with resolve. Serena watched, her heart swelling, a tide of possibility rising within her. The Oak Room was no longer just a restaurant. It was a movement. As the diners returned to their meals, their voices softer, more reverent, Serena sat, her eyes on the empty space where Harrison had stood. The fight wasn't over, but the ripples were spreading, and she was their source. 6 months later, the Oak Room pulsed with life, its tables filled with a tapestry of faces, businessmen in crisp suits, families in worn sneakers, couples sharing shy smiles over candlelit plates. The air hummed with the clatter of forks and the soft laughter of guests, the scent of roasted lamb and fresh rosemary weaving through the room. Serena sat at her old corner table, her white t-shirt and jeans, a quiet rebellion against the chandelier's golden glow. Her fingers traced the edge of a wine glass, the cool crystal grounding her as her eyes lingered on a wall now adorned with handwritten notes, letters of gratitude from guests pinned like stars in a constellation of change. Her heart swelled, a tide of pride and grief. Her father's dream no longer a ghost, but a living, breathing force. She leaned back, her breath steady, but her chest was a storm of memory. She saw her father's hands, calloused and sure, sketching menus under lamplight, his voice promising a place where every soul was royalty. That promise had been tarnished, but she'd clawed it back, rebuilt it with every word, every action. Her gaze drifted to the portrait on the wall, her father's face, eyes crinkled with warmth watching over the room. Her throat tightened, a lump forming as she whispered to herself, "I did it, Dad, and I'm not done." Maya approached, her manager's badge glinting, her smile radiant but tempered with a quiet strength. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice soft but steady. "The staff meeting went well. Everyone's on board with the new training." Her eyes sparkled, a far cry from the trembling girl of that fateful night. Serena's lips curved, a warmth spreading through her chest. Maya had blossomed, her kindness now a beacon, guiding the staff to embody the Vance standard. Every customer a VIP, every interaction a testament to dignity. "You're doing him proud," Serena said, her voice low, her eyes flicking to her father's portrait. Maya's cheeks flushed, her hands clasping briefly as if to hold the weight of the compliment. "It's because of you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You changed everything." Serena's heart ached not with pain but with possibility. She'd come here expecting a sanctuary, only to find a battlefield. But she'd turned it into something more, a movement, a legacy reborn. The room buzzed around them, alive with stories. A family at a nearby table laughed as their toddler smeared sauce on her cheeks, the father thanking a waiter for a high chair with a grin. A woman in a hijab sipped wine, her eyes bright as she chatted with her server, who knelt to hear her order over the din. The man in the navy suit, now a regular, sat alone, typing furiously on his laptop, his latest article praising the Oak Room as the gold standard of equality. Serena's chest tightened, a flicker of her father's laughter in her mind, his dream alive in every smile, every plate. Her phone vibrated, a cascade of notifications lighting the screen. The hashtag #Vance Standard had exploded, with thousands of posts, stories of guests welcomed without judgment, of servers trained to see every face as equal. A rival chain had adopted similar policies, citing Serena's example. A conference organizer had emailed, begging her to speak on transforming the industry. She scanned the messages, her pulse quickening, not with fear but with purpose. The ripples she'd started that night had become a tide, washing beyond these walls. A waiter approached, young and nervous, his hands twisting. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice trembling. "I used to work under Harrison. I followed his lead once. I'm sorry." His eyes dropped, shame carving lines into his face. Serena leaned forward, her gaze soft but unyielding. "You're here now," she said, her voice a lifeline. "Make it right." He nodded, his shoulders straightening, as if her words had unshackled him. He returned to his table, his smile brighter as he served a couple in casual clothes with the same warmth he'd offer a CEO. The woman in pearls, another regular now, caught Serena's eye from across the room. She raised her glass, a silent toast, her face free of the guilt it had carried months ago. Serena nodded, her lips curving faintly. The room was hers, not just as owner, but as its heart. Every laugh, every kind word, every plate served with care was a victory, a piece of her father's dream stitched back together. Maya lingered, her eyes on the wall of letters. "They keep coming," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "People say they've never felt so welcome anywhere." Serena's throat tightened, her father's face vivid in her mind. "That's what he wanted," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She stood, her sneakers quiet on the floor, and walked to the portrait. Her fingers brushed the frame, a silent vow. "I'll keep it going, Dad." The Oak Room wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a promise, a legacy reborn, and Serena was its keeper. The fight wasn't over, it never would be, but she was ready. Serena Vance, disguised in a simple t-shirt, confronts prejudice to reclaim her father's dream of a restaurant where every guest is a VIP. Through courage and conviction, she transforms the Oak Room into a beacon of dignity, sparking a movement that ripples beyond its walls. Thank you for joining this journey of justice and redemption. Please subscribe to our channel for more stories that ignite the heart and challenge the soul. Stay tuned for the next tale. Your support keeps these stories alive.